It's time for Sustainable Living with Glenn Boblitz, the show that helps you be prepared to care for your family regardless of the circumstances that may come your way. Now, here's your host for today, Mark Lamb.
Well, we're back with Glenn Boblitz, and it's always a treat when we come to these microphones because I have no idea where we're going. I know you do because you come in
the
with
garden. Yeah, that's where I spend most of the time is in the garden, trying to get other people into the garden.
You come in with that notebook, and I know you're loaded for something.
I'm ready. As ready as I can be. Anyway, we're going to talk about amending your soils again. We talk about it every year because your soils change every year. Got a lot of new people coming into gardening, getting a lot of questions about it. So
right.
you need to know what your garden needs to know. So
now you say amending. So I know you amend things like you amend the Constitution. You're adding something to it, or you're making it. You're tweaking it a bit.
I'm going to tweak it. That's what we're doing. You really should know which direction you need to tweak it, though.
Okay.
I mean, you can't look at soil and go, okay, I need to change my pH because you don't know what the pH is.
Right.
You could do some pH tests, go online and buy one of the little kits and all that. But if you want real accuracy, you could just dig up a sample.
Okay.
Take it down to your local ag extension agency. Every little town has one.
Okay.
They give you a little box, cost you like $20, $25. But it not only tells you your pH, it'll tell you how much you need to amend. It'll also tell about your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, some of the other elements that you need in your garden, which is just absolutely need-to-know information.
Right.
Secondly is you don't have to put on as much as what you thought.
Well, that's it. You'll save that $25 in fertilizer or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the store and buy a bag of nitrogen, you're going to spend $15, $20.
Right.
And that's for just a generic fertilizers.
Okay.
So it's well worth doing. You don't want to have to waste money. And you can find organics fertilizers as well as the traditional 10-10-10s, which are made from petroleum products.
Right.
I'd rather you didn't use those type because they build up a salt in your garden. But if that's all you can get and it's quick and easy for you, it's better than having a pitiful garden.
Okay.
So that's where we're starting at. And so anything that improves your soil, that makes your plants grow better, is considered an amendment.
Okay.
Whether you're adding carbon to the soil, which all plants need that, or nitrogen, or phosphorus, or potassium, any of those that make it grow better are a good amendment.
I have a question when it comes to that sample. What if I decide to commit 100 foot by 100 foot to do a garden, or 50 by 50? Do I need to pull two different samples from opposing corners, or is it going to be pretty accurate?
All right. Typically what I do, if I'm going to do like a field, you can't just pull one spot and go, okay, that's it. You go down about 2 inches, get one spoonful from there, one spoonful from somewhere else,
right,
and you just kind of make a grid out of your field or garden. If you have just a raised bed, same thing. Just kind of grid it off and pull out a spoonful until you can fill the little box up. And the little box is probably a cup and a half. Of soils.
Right.
That way you get an average, and that's close enough. I mean, if you want to spend the extra money, you could and have a larger garden or several gardens. You could do several of them. You're just going to have to pay for the extra test.
Okay.
And after a while, you'll start to be able to look at your soil, actually smell your soil, and tell what it's got. Now, that may take you 15 years of good experience, but
I gotcha.
You'll figure it out. So we're trying to do a sampling throughout the garden. Wouldn't make sense to do it any other way. So common sense things.
Okay.
That seems to be going on a lot. Common sense thinking here. All right. Changing the pH. That improves not only the pH, so the plant likes a certain range, But when you do that and you have the proper pH, and that stands for potential hydrogen, and I won't go into all that because it's just over your head. Just know it's called pH.
Right.
It's whether you're acidic or alkaline. If you have the proper pH, the plant can now, without an extra effort, improve the nutrient uptake.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's kind of got to be in balance for all those nutrients that you're putting in there to be able to be used by the plant. If the plant is struggling with the pH, just trying to survive,
right,
it can't do what it's supposed to do, which
right,
is grow and pull up nutrients and put it into your food. So get that pH right first, or as close as you can get it. And not all plants are trying to get the same pH. This is where it gets just a slightly complicated, but like tomatoes, they like 7 to 6.8 in pH. That's the range that they like. But if it's 6.9, it's not like your plant's going to die.
Right.
It just means it's not going to be optimum.
Okay.
They'll still grow. They'll still do that. They may, instead of putting out 100 pounds of tomatoes, you'll put out 95. So you can see it's not so critical. You got to hit the number dead on.
Right.
But if you aim for 7, almost your entire garden can deal with that.
Okay.
They go, okay, well, it's not absolutely perfect, but what in life is?
Not much.
Second, it will allow aeration into the soil, just because it will bind certain minerals together that create, it's like a glue.
Interesting.
Along with the bacteria, along with the microbes, along with everything else that's going on in there, everything is starting to balance out, and your soil takes on a structure. That structure will allow air to be trapped in there, because plants need air too. If you've ever overwatered anything, you can tell that you didn't have enough air, and air could have drowned it. Same principle. If you have that aeration, these hollow pockets, the water drains better. It'll allow the water to hold in that pocket for a certain period of time where the plant can uptake that water. So all these things are just critical to the pH being correct.
Okay.
Changing the pH. They will send you this report, and it'll say 100 pounds per acre of land. You should put 100 pounds of, say, lime if your soil's acidic. But you don't have an acre garden. So my suggestion, if you're just doing a little small plot, is to use the lime sparingly. Just put a little bit on, see how everything reacts. When I say wait a little bit, I mean a month or two.
Okay.
And just figure it out from there. Now, if you want to do the math, you can do the math. X number of square feet in an acre. Yours is X number of square feet for a garden. Do the little ratio, and there you are. So, this is all math and science here.
Right.
Don't want to try to make it too complicated, but it's really not.
Sure.
A quick Google search will do that for you. To change that pH, if you have a acidic soil, you can use lime or wood ashes, or you can get this carbon compost from any place that has a gasification plant where they burn wood chips to create electricity. We just bought a truckload of that last week, and we distributed among our little group.
Okay.
Now, it's full of carbon, it's full of nutrients that are balanced already. So that's a good thing. If you want to have neighbors all go in on a truckload, and it doesn't take a whole lot, a couple buckets full on a couple rows is plenty.
Okay.
And that'll start turning your soil that dark, rich color. My wife said the other day, we were standing at the garden eyeballing it, had with spring fever. And we said, wow, that is some pretty dirt. Now, that's not something you would think anybody would ever say. That's pretty dirt. But if you're a gardener and could see our soils after 10 years of tending it, It's pretty dirt. It's
Well,
rich, black, compost, full. It's got all the good stuff in there. That's where you want your garden to look.
That also helps support the idea of controlled burns, and the underbrush is taken care of, and then those areas thrive. People think controlled burn, well, you've destroyed it.
Not actually. Fire's been around a long time.
It has.
And
man always hasn't been there to, take care of it or whatever.
Actually, some of the pine forests, the pine cones don't even open up unless there's a fire. Do you know that?
I
think
did
it's the
not. Well,
loblolly.
now that you say that, I've seen plenty of closed ones. Yeah.
The big loblolly pines, the pine cone's pretty big,
Right.
and it takes fire to make the darn things even open up.
How about that?
And it's a cycle system. They're used to it. That's why they
Seems
put
like
that
it's by
bark.
design.
Yeah, almost. You would think. Baking soda. If you have a small patch and want a quick fix on that, and a box of baking soda over a 200 square foot area,
Right.
will change the pH. Now, you could see how much it changed by sending in another sample or getting one of the test kits from local garden center, which takes a little effort on your part, but you can see how much it changed it.
Yeah.
And the plants will respond to it. As with everything, don't go crazy.
Right.
It's best to do it gradual, a little patience, and let it work. Alkaline soils, I seriously doubt if we're going to have alkaline soils in our area. But if you have a high pH that you can't get back down, there's aluminum sulfate, which is, you can buy it in a garden center, and it's fast acting.
Right.
Anything that's fast acting, you should put on a little bit at a time.
Okay.
Because it may act so fast it screws up your garden, and you'll end up back to on the acid side of this balanced equation. So let's not do that. Sulfur, slow acting sulfur. That when you put that down, that may be lasting you 2 to 3 years. The little sulfur pellets. Then they have fast acting sulfur, garden sulfur, but it's powdered.
Right.
Don't get this stuff on you. You can actually absorb sulfur through your hands, through the pores in your skin. So you be careful when you're doing that. I don't recommend the dusting. I recommend that you mix it in a slurry solution and spray it out using a garden sprayer. It's kind of a pain in the butt because it'll clog your sprayer up unless you shake it continuously, blah, blah, blah. But the fast acting, what they refer to as garden sulfur, and it'll be powdered. The sulfur pellet's much easier to deal with. Still wear gloves. You can just throw it out, and you're good for about 2 years because it takes that long to break it down. Organic matter. Any kind of organic matter that is composted into your compost pile, or even if you're just doing a mulch and letting it doing slowly, does two things. Keeps the weeds down. Mulch, I'm talking about mulch here, keeps the weeds down. Plus it will break down into an organic matter that the microbes can use, then the plants can use it. All these microbes, we keep going back to these little guys, they're going to break down any kind of wood chips you put down, mulch, cover, straw, it doesn't matter. They're going to break it down. You go, where did it all go? Well, the microbes got a hold of it. They broke it down, and they released the nutrients. But it takes that microbial action in the decomposition process to make that work. So it's a slow, steady cycle, just like the woods. If you look at the woods, you would think after 20 years, the leaves ought to be, 20 feet thick. Because every year they drop 8 inches leaves out into the forest, but that's not the way it works. Rain beats it down, adds weight to it, and the microbes get a hold of it, and there we go.
That's happening in my backyard right now.
Right now, exactly. So the organic material is going to do a couple things. One, it's a source of carbon, and we are a carbon-based planet. All plants are going to be a carbon-based. That's their structure. That's what they building blocks. That's their little CMUs, concrete blocks that they build on top of one another on a micro scale, carbon. Secondly, it holds water. If you're having to water your plants, you want the water to stay with the plants, and this organic material will act like a sponge and hold it there. That gives the microbes a good environment to grow, gives the fungi a good environment to grow, and it gives your plants' root systems available water to build off of. Plants actually pull up water to use as an air conditioning system. You know how hot it is in the summer, 90 degrees. How does that plant cool itself off?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't really sweat, but same principle. It opens up the pores of the leaves, lets the water evaporate out, carries the heat with it, and that's how the plant stays cool. That's why it's always cooler under a tree.
Okay.
Because that thing is evaporating, evaporative cooling. That's how all air conditioners kind of work. So, pretty good design there too.
Yeah.
The organic material may be manure, good composted manure. That's a good source. It usually has enough carbon in it and enough nutrients in it. You get a 2-for-1 out of that. That will invite worms and all the microbes in.
Okay.
And everybody likes the worm castings. You know, they're a little expensive to buy at the store, but the worms will produce it for free if you have the worms. But they have to have something to eat too. And there's a lot of organic material for them to eat in manure. So that's a good thing to put on there. But manure is pretty hot when it's first put on. You don't want to put green manure on by the buckets full because it's too hot. When I say it's too hot, there's too much nitrogen available to the plant. The plant will try to uptake it and it burns it up. So I've seen tomato plants and the whole thing turns yellow. And they go, what happened? Well, you dumped raw cow manure on there and it was too much nitrogen and it burned it up. So composting, let it start working down by the microbes, and you can work it in that way. That way some of the ammonia and nitrates are all been broke down to elemental size where the plant can uptake it slowly. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
A little goes a long way. Biochar, that's what I was talking about the gasification plants. They burn the wood chips from forestry production. What's left over is ash and charcoal. Well, the charcoal is not like you think, like you start your grill. This is micro-sized charcoal up to about the size of a BB. So it's a little,
Wow.
So it's easy to work with, but it is potent also. And remember, wood ashes will raise your pH if you have acidic soils, Virginia red clay. So a little at a time, watch how it reacts, stir it in. You don't want to just dump a pile onto a plant. It's just too much at one time.
Right.
This is the time of the year that you should try to do these amendments because you don't have a whole lot growing. And you get it stirred in, and the microbes will immediately take off and start working that and break it down to an elemental size and in the right pH and all that kind of stuff. And so when you go to put your plants in, it is not a hot batch. It's already been broken down even more than it originally was, and it's distributed in the soil evenly. That's what we're after. A lot of people use leaves on their garden. Now that does a couple things. That adds a raw compost that's not fully composted. The time you rake them up this time of year, they're kind of beaten up. They got the little veins that are starting in.
Right.
That's because the microbes are working them already. Now, what that's going to do is keep any weeds from coming up through it.
Oh.
But you don't want to stir it in right off. You use that as your topping. That's your weed cover. You to keep the moisture in. It's a good thing to do. And then in the late fall of the year, you can grind them all in, rototill them all in, but don't mix them in right away.
Okay.
You want the microbes to get a hold of that first, but it is a good mulch. So a lot of people do that. we ought to. This stuff shouldn't be going to the landfill. It ought to be going to gardeners. They ought to have a big pile out there for us. In fact, some of the counties actually do that. Anything that's mulched up, you can go over there. If you belong to the county, it's free. If you go in there as a gardener from another county, you have to pay a little bit. But it's very reasonable.
It's worth it.
Yep.
We're going to go into break here, and when we come back, I want you to answer this question. Is there a particular leaf that's maybe better or worse when it comes to like maple or oak or whatever? Let's address that when we get back. We're with Glenn Ballblitz. We're talking about soil and how to prepare your soil for your gardening that's going to happen, hopefully for you, this spring.
Get ready for a new soundtrack for your life. Doc Rock, Smith Mountain Lake. It's music that'll take away your troubles for a while.
That's what I'm talking about!
Wake up with Janet and Mark on the Morning Jam. They'll keep you informed and encouraged, and we all need more of that.
You say jam?
You're invited to be a part of the Doc Rock family, your feel-good station. Doc Rock, Smith Mountain Lake.
We're back with more Sustainable Living with Glenn Ballblitz. Be sure to look for Sustainable Living on Facebook for even more information and follow-up conversations with other members. Now, here's your host, Mark Lamb.
We're back with Glenn Ballblitz. The reason I wanted to ask that question is, it seems like around an oak tree, it's hard to get grass to grow.
Right.
And, a lot of people blame that on the leaves that fall and maybe other things that are happening in the soil because of the oak tree.
Oak has a tannic acid in it. You would see the same thing under a walnut tree.
Okay.
Walnut has a huge amount of tannic acid. That's why all the farmers planted them along their fences, because they kept things from growing under it. Because it's too acidic. Now, adding, most people are going to have oak, maple. Maple's not nowhere near acidic, but
a lot of poplar trees around here,
right.
too.
Poplar's not very acidic. That would also be a good one. But it's not going to hurt the soil because it's going to be on top. And because you've added these amendments to it to balance it out, next year add a little lime. If you're using these leaves, you probably have to add a couple handful extra of lime, and that'll take care of that. Now, the microbes and things have this fantastic system going on at which they can balance that soil out. Even though it may start out a little high, because they break it down into an elemental form, they can actually absorb and do that. The woods doesn't need so much lime and fertilizer.
Right.
And look at all the oak leaves there. So there is a system in place to handle slightly higher acidic soils. Now, it's not like they're really acidic, like vinegar acidic. They're just mildly acidic. But what they're doing is covering the sunlight from the ground. That keeps new weeds from coming up. Some weeds are tougher than others. They'll poke through it. But it will balance it out. Again, you're going to test your soils, and it's going to, from last year, you say, okay, I put a lot of leaves on, let me test the soil below it, and we'll see. And that's what you end up with. You say, okay, I need to add an extra handful because this year it seems a little high. There you are. That's how you handle it. Pine needles. Pine needles I don't recommend putting on vegetable gardens. Now, pine needles would do all right in a strawberry patch.
Interesting.
Because they're a little acidic. They like it acidic. Would also do well for blueberries, anything that's acidic. You have to kind of know what you have as far as plant-wise. Is it an acid-loving soil, or is it a alkaline-loving soil plant? I'm trying to think of some other ones that would like an acid one. Escapes me at the moment. Rhododendrons. What's one of the other ones that they acidify? Doesn't matter. Your plants, you find out.
And there's plenty of resources.
Yeah, and there's plenty of resources out there. You just, whatever you think you're going to plant or grow, you can type it in. What kind of soil does my plant like? And I have rhododendrons, or I have tomato. And there's somebody out there that has all that. There's no way I can look them all up for you and rattle them off. I remember a lot, but not as much as I used to.
Me too, man. Me too.
Minerals. Now we're talking micronutrients in the soil. There's a bunch of them, but every one of them plays a different part, and that's what's wrong with our industrialized farming is they've wore out the soil. Now they may be putting back nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, 10, 10, 10, but they're not putting back the minerals because the minerals are extremely expensive.
Okay.
And it's very hard to get a good balance of what is supposed to be there. Now, you can get these ancient minerals from ancient seabeds.
Okay.
And that is the perfect mix. There's one, it's called azomite. We use it a lot. And you don't have to do that every year.
Okay.
And your soil test that you get back from the ag department is not going to have all the elements in there that should be there.
Gotcha.
It's just too tedious a test. The test would cost you thousands of dollars if you tested for every single micronutrient there is. So whatever elements are on the periodic table, that's what's supposed to be there in a exact amount. Well, the best way to do that is to start out where the minerals came from, the oceans. The oceans have the exact same mineral content that your body is supposed to have in proportion. And it's crazy, but you're supposed to have arsenic in your system.
Yeah, I know.
And it is such a minute amount, but your body was set up to handle that and to use that. Now, you get outside that range of what it's supposed to have, and you're going to get sick. So how do you get that perfect match? Well, it has to be matched up with something else that's perfect. Are you seeing the design again? Okay.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot because it's there. So azomite is one of them. Dolomite is another. Dolomite is from the ancient seas, and it is actually a clay that has been powdered, but it's ancient algae, plus all the seawater, and it's very good for your soil. Let's see what else is there. Just standard limestone. You can get powdered limestone, little small granules. It's just rocks, folks. Virginia blue limestone. It's just rocks that are ground up.
Right.
Now, they're not going to dissolve right away. In fact, it'll probably take 15, 20 years for limestone rock.
Wow.
But the microbes are going to do their jobs. The worms are going to do their jobs. The worms actually eat rocks and pass them through their body. The acids in their stomach breaks it down a little bit more, and it goes out the other end, and there you are, worm castings.
Wow.
Ancient sea salts. Now, I've talked about this several times. There's like the pink Himalayan sea salt. Be careful, folks. There is a BS company out there from another country, can you guess which one, that is turning this salts from their petroleum products into ancient sea salts. No, they're not. They're just coloring it and charging out the wazoo. So do your due diligence. Find a reputable company, something that's not coming from China, because China's all about the money and that's it.
Right.
They don't care about your garden. Find somebody that cares about your garden, and find one of these ancient salts. Now, it only takes a 2% solution, and we talked about how to get that 2% solution. You just keep adding salt, this ancient salt, to a gallon of water until it won't dissolve no more. That tells me that water is holding 100% of the salt that it can handle.
Wow.
Out of that, you would take 2 ounces and put it into a gallon jug of clean water. Now, it's not a perfect 2%, but that's what you're going to fertilize with, a 2% solution. That will add the minerals into the micronutrients into your soil. Now, you can put that on both sides of your row. You don't want to pour it on a plant because it's salt. But the microbes will start picking that up and breaking it down even further to a colloidal level, which will pass through a cellular membrane, which is how it gets into the plants. That's how it gets into your body, and uptake through that plant. And that's what's creating the taste of a tomato that you just go, oh my gosh, that is so good. Why does this tomato taste so much better? It's because these micronutrients are in there. Those micronutrients are the taste. Hence, they are the nutrients. Hence, that's what you need. You need all that. And that's what I was saying about industrial agriculture. All that's gone.
Right.
And that's why the tomato that you get on a biscuit from fast food tastes like doo-doo.
Right.
That's why...
Or it has very little taste at all.
Right. That's why these hothouse tomatoes, hothouse cucumbers have a very slight taste, not much to them at all.
Right.
It's also why our fruit tastes the way it does.
Okay.
Because they have just wiped out the nutrients, and they spray under the trees. Did you know that? You ever been to an orchard, U-pick orchard, and there's no grass under the trees? Now, how'd that happen? Well, they sprayed something, and when you spray that, you've killed the living soil.
Right.
So they're doing it for a profit. I understand that. I just not going to give them my money for that fruit.
Sure.
So that's the whole thing here. So I grow my own fruit, I grow my own vegetables, and that's how you get healthy. Minerals. The sea salt you don't have to do about once every 5 years because it doesn't get used up that fast. It just has to be there. Now, some of the plants will uptake them in the root system, use them in the root system, and when the plant dies, it releases them again. The whole cycle turns over again. So it's recycling itself. Some of that is going to be used up by the fruit of that plant or the vegetable of that plant. You're going to uptake it. But it's such a small amount that it'll last you a good 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay.
So it's not expensive. It's well worth doing. Now, we talked about 10-10-10 fertilizer. What are these numbers meaning? 10-10-10, the first one's going to be nitrogen. Now, if it was 20-10-10, there'd be twice as much nitrogen in that fertilizer mix compared to the other two. Now, those are the basic ones that plants have to have. That's what industrial farming does. They just put on the 10-10-10 or whatever that soil needs because they're going to do their test too.
They're going to test it too, yeah.
But it's petroleum products. Now, can you get anything that 10-10-10 is not petroleum products? Absolutely. Dried blood is super high in nitrogen. Do you know that? They actually harvest the blood from butcher systems.
Okay.
And this kind of sounds gross, but you're just recycling is all you're doing here. And they break it down and they dry it out, but that stuff is potent. So if you wanted to give a number to a bag of dry blood that you see at your local garden center, it may say 30-0-0. That is a lot of nitrogen. So that 30 means it's very potent. I would not put a cupful on a plant or you won't have a plant. What you would do is sprinkle a teaspoon around the plant because it is so potent. But it is a natural source of nitrogen.
Okay.
There's others. It is the building block. Nitrogen is the building block for leaf and stem growth. Now, if you don't have that nitrogen there, the plants tend to look pale. If you've ever had a couple of sick-looking plants, you put on Miracle Grow. If you look at a Miracle Grow package, the nitrogen is usually pretty high in the Miracle Grow. That's why it's got that blue look.
Okay.
And it'll bring them back and turn them nice and green. Okay, we get that. Well, try to use the natural sources rather than petroleum base. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to beat up on your local garden center if that's
Right.
all they have.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have a good soil mix that is balanced and have the right amount of nutrients, you shouldn't need a whole lot of pesticides because the plant is healthy. And that's what we're trying to point out here is if you give the plant the correct micronutrients and macronutrients, it should be able to fight off that bug.
Okay.
Because that bug's not going to like that arsenic.
Right.
The bug's going to say, that tasted like crap to a bug. Now, to us, we don't taste it. We don't have that kind of refined taste. But a bug's very small, or a little nematode is very small, and he recognizes this is a healthy plant, and it has all the chemical warfare that it needs to fight me off.
Okay.
And that's what's happening. But on this flip side, if you don't, plant and the bugs are in war. And the bug will say, this is a weak plant. I can take him out, no problem. And now I get to have the whole plant.
Right.
That's how this is working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just simple analogy. I realize that. All right, back to 10-10-10. The second number is going to be phosphorus. Phosphorus is important for photosynthesis. That's how the plant feeds itself with sugar. Again, wants that little sugar high. It also wants to share that sugar with all the microbes in the ground. So in order for that photosynthesis to take place, phosphorus has to be there. There is a chemical reaction that goes on that you taking sunlight and turning it into a sugar. Holy cow, carbon has to be there. All those things have to be there. So phosphorus is one of the key elements for that. So you can see if it was a low phosphorus soil, it would not be producing enough sugars, i.e. it would not produce enough sugars to make a fruit or to make a bulb or a root. Carrots are roots, so if it's not feeding all that stuff, you're not going to get much.
Okay.
So that's how important it is. It also aids in the development of flowers, the fruit itself, and the root system, as I just said. So these minerals all have to work together and be balanced in the correct amount in order for you to get the fruit, and that's what we're after. And I keep saying fruit. I'm not talking about apple fruit. Fruit can be anything that your plant is going to produce, a fruitful harvest. Third number will be the potassium, NPK. This is the third number. This regulates the water uptake, and it also aids in the photosynthesis. So it's pretty important because if it can't uptake that water, and that's crazy. What's that got to do with pulling water up? Well, it's all about magnetism, really. So the plant needs the phosphorus in order for you to uptake that water. It also regulates how much water it can uptake. So it's like a dimmer switch.
Wow.
Pulls it up too much, the plant gets all spindly and falls down, died. Too little, it gets too hard, won't pump up the nutrients, and it dies. So it regulates that water uptake. Second thing it does is it builds the root system. Real important. If you don't have a good foundation, you're not going to have a good plant. Same way in your life. If you don't have a good foundation in your life, you will go all to pieces. It is the main carrier of all these micronutrients. If you don't have the potassium, all them cool azomite, dolomites, and lime, and all, it can't uptake that stuff. It is a carrier. It's a little car that delivers to every part of that plant that it needs those micronutrients, including the immune system.
Right.
Even the smallest element, it has to be there in order to do that. So you can work your butt off, put all these amendments in it, and if your potassium's wrong, it's not going to uptake it. It's just going to sit there.
Wow.
There's a whole lot more to gardening than just putting a seed in the ground, as that Hooter head said. All right, you don't really need to know all these. if you get a balanced fertilizer, a organic balanced fertilizer. But magnesium, calcium, sulfur, all of those are extremely important. The magnesium helps in the cell division. That's what makes things grow. Instead of being 1 inch high, it's now 2 inches high if you have the correct magnesium, and so on and so on. It also creates all the proteins that give you the oils and like in a nut tree. If you don't have the magnesium there, it's not going to create that oil because those oils are a long chain, and the magnesium is what kind of glues it all together. Certain enzymes, certain plants have enzymes in them that are good for our bodies. That's how we build all the amino acids in our bodies. And you want the plant to give you all that so your immune system does well. So it activates the enzymes. That's magnesium. It allows the chlorophyll to convert the sunshine into sugar. That's one of the carriers that the potassium has to be with to make that process complete. Calcium keeps the plant strong. You can have a plant that grows like crazy and then falls over. Can you imagine if corn did not have enough calcium in the field?
Oh, yeah.
A little wind would come along, they'd blow them over.
Yeah.
It gives that plant structure. It's kind of like concrete for plant world. It is another carrier of nutrients. And all these things I'm telling you are carriers. They're the same way in your body. If you have low calcium, low magnesium, and you look pale, it's because these minerals are not there. Where are you supposed to get these minerals? From your food.
Yeah.
So here we go, folks.
Yeah. No wonder we're running on fumes.
Exactly. We're eating produce and trying to do the right things, but the minerals aren't there.
Right.
It's not a natural product.
It's like a hollow product almost.
Yeah, it is a hollow product, like a candy bar. Yeah, you get a little jolt of sugar, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Not real good for you. The sulfur, sulfur is real important for the metabolizing of the sugars in your body. Same way. That's what's going to give you your energy. If you don't have that sulfur in your body, well, it's the same way in the plant.
Right.
It's a carrier and creator of the proteins, oils, and things in fruits. It's the same way that the calcium, the magnesium, they're all having to work together to create this system in which you can carry it into the plant, which carries it into your body. And you should have the same thing. And let me see, the last one, the sulfur. If you've ever tasted something that was so intensely flavored, it's because the sulfur has combined all these micronutrients and creates a complex sugar. That's what taste is. Also, that's what nutrients is. So the sulfur is extremely important if you want extremely good tasting food. Tomatoes like a little sulfur, and that's what gives them that tomato taste. That when you just want to put a little dab of salt on it and go, I just want to eat it all. You can keep the bread, keep the mayonnaise, just let me eat the tomato because it's so good. Same way with apples. How many apples have you ate where the juice run down your elbow and you said, that is the most delicious apple? Sulfur in the soil has pulled all those micronutrients up, combined them in a packet, and put it on the end of your tongue. That's the best way to describe that. Yeah. And that's about all we got for today.
Okay. Wow, that's quite a bit. I mean, stuff happening in the ground, on top of the ground.
Yeah, you might want to put this and rewind it several times and write this stuff down because it was extremely important.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, as usual, thank you.
Thank you.
Join us again next week for Sustainable Living with Glenn Boblitz, helping you be prepared and not scared. This podcast drops every Friday anywhere you get your podcast.